Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we will be reacting to Nilered and how he turns, pretty much how he turns a cotton ball into cotton candy.
No way, that's actually insane. I never thought that would be chemically possible. It's me, Jack, and we're doing it with Ethan today. Welcome to the video. Let's get in. Okay, here's the video.
About 2 years ago, I became convinced that there was a way to turn cotton balls into edible and
Like, how does
hopefully
anyone go
tasty
on the
cotton
strain of
candy.
thought to
At
get this?
first, this
Honestly, it is
idea seemed a
actually a
bit
madness.
ridiculous, but I knew that it should have been possible. This is
Yes,
because
It's not.
cotton, even though it
it
doesn't
is.
seem
Leave
like it
me.
at all,
Let him cook.
is technically entirely sugar. The
Yes,
only
that's
problem is that
yeah.
all this sugar, or more specifically glucose,
That looks like a fucking
is
bird.
trapped in something called cellulose.
And now it's a
They're not
lightning
fucking
bolt.
bugs.
It acts like a completely different material, and we can use it to make things like cotton balls and clothing. At its core, though, it's
Shameless
all
plug.
just sugar. So, what I dreamed of doing was breaking down cotton balls back into sugar and then turning them into candy. I didn't just want to make any candy, though, and I specifically wanted to make cotton candy. I wanted to make literal cotton candy.
Literally
capping.
cotton candy.
The
There's
first
no
thing
It
I
is
had
way.
to
literally
do
capping. It is
was
capping.
figure out how to even do it.
No way.
I had to come up with a way to break down the
Cellulose. I
cellulose
swear
back into sugar,
cellulose
and
came
my
from fucking
first idea was
plants.
to use an enzyme.
Yeah.
This was because I had already used an
It's
enzyme
literally
for
the
another
shit in the fucking
project
leaf.
where I turned toilet paper into drinkable alcohol,
What the fuck?
and it had worked
What
really
the
well.
fuck?
For that one, I used an
He
enzyme
needs
called
to become
cellulase,
water white.
and I was able to break down the
He pretty
toilet
much is.
paper,
Ew, that looks
which is
grim.
also entirely cellulose.
That is
This
literally
gave me a
fucking like
solution of
baby
sugar, which I fermented to alcohol using yeast,
It's like,
and then I distilled it to
Wait.
make
That is
my
just
toilet
piss.
paper moonshine. The whole process ended up being surprisingly efficient,
I wonder how it
and I
tasted.
figured it was the best place to start.
It
Toilet
tastes like
paper.
The only issue
wow,
was that
crazy.
the enzyme I'd used wasn't pure, and it was mixed with maltodextrin and cornstarch.
Like, who
Oh,
comes up with these
These
names?
maltodextrin.
sugars, but they weren't fermentable by yeast,
Maltodextrin, that's this
so
shit
none
that they
of it
have in
turned into
fucking
alcohol,
G Fuel.
and they didn't at all
That's sick.
interfere with
It,
that
it
project.
fucking like spikes
However,
your
for
blood
this
sugar.
one, I couldn't have any extra sugar floating around.
Nuh-uh,
It would
no
be
sugar.
almost impossible to separate it from the sugar that I made, and it would just be a huge mess. I had to find somewhere to buy the pure enzyme, and the
Cellulose.
easiest and cheapest source seemed to be Alibaba. It was
Oh
pretty
my
easy to go
god.
on, find a
Alibaba.
listing, and order the
You can
enzyme,
fucking buy
but
cellulose
actually
of
getting what I
Alibaba.
wanted
Actually, wait, yeah,
turned out to be
that
a
makes
huge
sense.
pain.
Ignore
The
the
first
48p
and biggest
change.
problem was that I never knew if it was actually going to be sugar-free. I always asked, and they would confirm that it was,
Okay.
but it never seemed
Okay.
fully believable. Also, the Canadian government kept seizing the packages and holding them for months. This one, by far, had to be the worst one that I got. Customs had apparently torn it open and repackaged it by just throwing it into a loose plastic bag. It was also brown, which immediately told me that it wasn't very pure, and I could tell there was sugar in it because it was sticky when I touched it.
Ew.
It took months, but I eventually got one that seemed decent,
You got
and it
cumulose.
of course arrived as
Cumulose,
ginseng
perfect.
extract. It was an off-white, but still pure powder, and it
Crack.
didn't seem to have any fillers or
That is
sugars.
literally
When I
fucking a
tried it on
crack.
the cotton, though, it just didn't work very well. I
That's
think
piss.
the enzyme itself was good quality, and the cotton was just
yes.
really stubborn. I knew that it would
Damn.
be a bit harder to break down than toilet paper, but I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. I was never really able to do it, and after trying for a while, I basically gave up.
No.
About a
Good.
year later,
Good.
though, I got really inspired for some reason, and I decided to attempt this project again. I read every single book, article, or paper that I could find, and I slowly put something together. My biggest challenge was that I didn't want to
What
have
the
to use
fuck?
any specialized equipment or weird chemicals, and I
We should
wanted it
take
to be as
notes.
simple as possible.
Yeah.
I also
Chemistry is
ideally wanted
never
the sugar
simple.
that
What
I
do you
made to
mean?
taste good, or at the very least, not poison me.
You're
Yeah.
literally
About
not
a
trying to even
week,
kill
I
yourself,
ended
or
up
you're
coming
literally
up
not
with
trying to
something
become
that
God.
I thought could work. Instead of using enzyme to break down the cotton, I would just use acid, and the
That
process
good, yeah,
seemed to
just
be
like regular acid.
surprisingly
You know,
simple.
shit that
Acid,
can
So I
that's
burn
skull,
decided
you.
to just
that's skull
jump
and
right into
crossbones.
it,
Just look like two
and I
strikes
picked up
mushed
an
together.
entire bag of cotton
Yeah.
balls. I went with the large ones, just because I felt like it, and it looked like a lot, but it was only about 77 grams.
That's actually crazy.
Now, the next main ingredient that I needed
no way.
was some 98%.
I could lift that.
No way. Like cotton balls are lighter than air. No way. Whoa. No.
Wait.
Wait. That doesn't sound right. No.
Concentrated sulfuric acid.
Oh my.
For all this cotton, I calculated that I needed 230 grams
Okay,
of
where's
it,
this come from?
and I poured it directly onto 70 grams
Where's
of
the
ice.
evidence?
This almost immediately caused most of the ice to melt, and when it was all added,
Bro, that's
I turned
that's
on the
crazy.
stirring.
Just...
What I was doing
Murray.
here was just diluting the sulfuric acid and bringing the concentration down from
It's a fucking
98%
bean.
to 75. I also used ice to do
Come on,
this
put a
because
fucking
it
Tic Tac
generated
in
a
there.
lot of heat, and the whole solution was
Oh
now
my, this is
probably
what
around
Walter White
60
should do.
C or
How the fuck is
140
the ice
Fahrenheit.
steaming?
If I'd used regular water instead of ice,
Water vapor,
it
Ethan.
probably
It's
would have
called water
violently
vapor.
boiled and splashed,
That is not a thing.
which wouldn't have been ideal.
No,
But
my
anyway,
bad.
when it looked like it
It's
was all
propane,
mixed,
like in
I
vapes.
turned off the stirring, and I let it cool down to room
No,
temperature.
it's aerosol. My bad. Wrong word.
About 30
Sim.
minutes later, it was good to go, and I pulled out the
Okay.
stir bar. It was now time
Nah,
to
you
add the
should have
cotton,
stuck your hand in that.
You've just
and I
made
started
fucking
with
water.
just one ball.
Great job, lad.
I
Yeah,
then
look at
poked
it.
it
It's not
around
doing
a bit,
anything.
and it
Yeah.
almost immediately started falling apart.
Oh, okay. My
In
bad.
general,
Oh,
the
what
Just
the
looks
ball
like
was
fuck?
it just looks
pretty
like common
tough,
water.
and I thought that it was interesting to see it just disintegrate. It only took a minute for it to become a little gooey blob, and I felt that I was ready to add
Tasty.
the rest. So, I carefully loaded in a small
You're not
handful,
who you want to be
and it
when you're
looked
hungry.
like it was
Eat
barely
a
gonna
Snickers.
fit. At first, this was a bit concerning, because this was only a small fraction of what I had to add. With just a bit of poking around
He's
and
literally just
stirring,
making
though,
fucking sewage
it
water.
slowly
No, it looks like
disappeared
fucking
into the
dumplings.
acid.
What kind of dumplings you been having?
Oh, it looks like fetal
I then
juices.
continued adding
It's
the rest
gone
of the cotton,
grey.
Bro,
and I
what
was
are those
honestly
black
a bit
things?
worried
Black worms.
that it wasn't going to be able to eat the whole bag.
Edible.
Now, as far as I know, there
He's
was
making a
no
fucking
major reaction
ecosystem in
going
there.
on here, and the cotton was
They are
just getting
growing.
dissolved. I wasn't able to find much info about it, but it seems like the sulfuric acid
That's some science right
was
there.
probably just interacting
Yeah.
with the cellulose. It was
He's got the
forming a
ho-ho.
complex around their hydroxyl groups, which normally help the fibers
Oh, I love chemistry,
stay
man.
tightly packed together. This was causing them to separate and
No.
fall apart and dissolve into the acid. It really
Oh,
didn't
they
seem
got
like it was going
divorced.
to work,
They got divorced.
but I
like
was
me
able
and
to
my
fit the
mother.
whole bag.
Wait.
Now at this
Wait,
point,
what?
things were looking pretty good, but to fully dissolve the cotton,
Hold up.
I had to
My
warm it up
bad,
a bit.
chat.
So I dropped it into a hot water bath at 50 C, and
Bro, the
I let
fucking
it
Tic
sit
Tac
there
just
for 30
disappeared.
minutes. When it was done, it looked like all the cotton had disappeared, and I pulled it out of the bath.
The
He's
Tic
made
Tac's
like
back.
shit
Into
coke. He's just made
456
like shit coke.
milliliters of boiling hot water.
But it's gonna turn
This
into cotton
diluted
candy
the acid
somehow.
even more, and it brought it
Yeah,
down from the 75%
like, where's the
that I
pig
had
coming from?
before to 27%.
Turn it down a little.
I then washed out the beaker with a bit of water
Okay.
to make sure that I transferred everything, and I added a thermometer. I now had to keep this at 85 C,
Why?
and even though it didn't look like much was happening, it was the most important step.
No, it's
In
not.
the
You're
other
lying to
one,
yourself.
the cotton had just been
You shit in a
dissolved,
cup.
but here, it was actually getting
Nah.
chopped up.
No, you can't
The
say
long
that.
cellulose fibers were
But
being
look at
attracted
it.
by the acid and water,
Two
and they
girls,
were
one
breaking
cup.
the
No
bonds
way.
between the sugar
Oh,
units.
no.
This type of reaction is called a hydrolysis reaction, and they were breaking it down
It looks like a
into
bloody
smaller
stick
and
bug.
smaller pieces.
No,
I had to keep it running like this for 2 hours, and in that
oh,
time,
it looks like a horse
it
if it grew
should
a leg on
fully
its head.
break down into glucose.
Yeah.
When it was done, it looked about the same, and I poured all of this into an even larger beaker.
Okay.
This one was surrounded with ice to help cool things down, but it was still going to take a while. So, in the meantime, I prepared something else that I needed. I went and got some of my food-grade calcium carbonate, which
Yeah,
is
as you
basically
do.
just chalk. I would be
As you
using
do,
this to
in your
neutralize all
cupboards.
the sulfuric acid, but I
Yeah.
couldn't just
Oh,
throw
that
it
looks
in
like
as a
some good
powder.
snorting stuff.
I had to make it into a slurry, and based on my
What
calculations,
the fuck is a
I
slurry?
needed about 245 grams. So,
Oh
I
yes,
measured
I need
that
to make it
out.
into a
and
slurry.
125
Sounds like a
mils
fucking
of
place
water.
in England.
More like sorry.
Yeah.
I then stirred it
this
around,
milk
and
looks
after
yummy.
a few minutes, it was good to go.
That is not milk, my guy.
That is calcium
When everything
carbonate. It's close
eventually
enough.
cooled down to around room temperature, I started adding the goopy chalk.
Why is it so thick?
Oh, what the
It reacted
fuck?
almost immediately with the sulfuric
That is
acid,
not
and it was
that.
releasing a lot of CO2 gas. This was
Oh,
all
he's
being
gassing
generated
himself.
as the acid was being neutralized, and the acid itself was turning into calcium sulfate.
Ooh,
The only
sulfate.
problem was
Sulfate's
that I
bad.
had to add the chalk in small amounts, or
Yeah.
else it would bubble out of the beaker. This was a very slow process, and it was going okay,
Oh, just
until
put
it
a lid on it,
eventually
it's
got a
fine.
bit too thick.
Yeah, so it explodes.
This happened because the calcium sulfate was practically insoluble in water,
Oh,
and it was
it's
all separating
convulsing.
out. So to fix
Uh,
this, I occasionally added some extra water to loosen things up, and it seemed to help. I also added some more water to the chalk, and I slowly added the rest of it.
Yes, loosen it up. Me and your mother. Wait.
At some
what?
point, it really started looking way too much like iced coffee, and it was a bit
really
scary
does,
how much
to
I
be
wanted
fair.
to taste it. It would have been a horrible
Yeah.
idea, though,
Why is it still
and
expanding?
it would have
I
tasted
swear the reaction's
absolutely
done.
awful. But anyway, I was eventually done adding the chalk, and when I tested the pH, it told me that it was roughly neutral. What I had
Okay.
now was hopefully a mixture of
I'll take your
calcium
guess for it.
sulfate
Okay,
and dirty sugar
quick
water.
quiz question. What is neutral in chemistry?
It's like a 7.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the next step was to filter it.
Let him cook.
I poured in as much as I could into the filter, but it wasn't even close to fitting everything. I was only able to add what looked like half of it, and I
You've
was
literally
gonna
just
have to do
made
this
like
in
a
2
more
batches.
shit chocolate milk.
After loading up as much as I could,
Just let him
I
cook.
turned on the vacuum,
Let him cook.
and I started pulling
Well,
out
literally
the water.
is fucking cooking.
This was all being
He's cooking
drained into a
chemicals.
flask below the filter, and I was getting some nice and clear, dark liquid. When
That's
the
apple
stuff in the
juice.
filter looked dry, I
I don't
added
think it
some
would
water.
taste like apple juice, Ethan.
I then mixed it around, and I was doing this to wash out any sugar that might have been stuck in the calcium sulfate.
What the fuck was that?
Why is it so? It sounds like it's
This
cracked.
was then all pulled
Ew, what the
through,
fuck?
and I washed it a second time. Now
I'd
I
stick my
had to
dick in
deal
there.
with the other half of the stuff, so I
What?
washed the filter, and I added
Why has
everything
it
that was
got
left in the
fuck, you
beaker.
grew an afro?
It was all just barely able to fit, and I turned on the vacuum. Just like
Why has it got
before, I
boba in
pulled
it?
it all through, and I washed it
Oh,
twice
it's
with some
cracking.
water. In the flask below, I was left with a bunch of dark liquid.
Good
This was
some
all
good
hopefully
wine
some dirty
right
sugar
there.
water, but up
That
until
is literally
now,
just fucking like red
I
wine.
had no idea if I had actually made any sugar. To figure this out, though,
No.
it was actually pretty easy, and I just had to use a glucose test strip.
Okay.
This is normally used
Oh,
to
yeah,
check
it's just
for
normal.
sugar in pee, and I was a bit worried that it would tell me that there was nothing. However, it actually gave me some really good results. It told me that there was for sure glucose in there,
Oh, nice.
and that there was probably a decent amount. The only problem was that it was still full of impurities,
Yeah, I can
side
tell
products,
that.
and leftover acid,
Yeah.
and what I had to do next was try and clean it up a
How
bit.
does a man think
To
of
do
this, though?
this, I
How
figured the
deranged
easiest
do you
way
have to be?
was to use something
No, hey,
called
of
a
course,
mixed
no, Red.
ion
This man is
exchange
crazy.
resin.
He's awesome.
At first, this might sound a bit
He's a
fancy,
chemist, so
and it
so
kind of is,
Mad
he
but
can't
science.
it's
have to be
actually
crazy.
super simple to
Oh,
use.
blue gems.
It's also commonly used to purify
The
aquarium water,
blue
so
crystal
it's
meth.
pretty cheap and quite easy to
Yummy.
buy. I got all my resin from Amazon, and all I did was put it in this plastic tube. Now to clean the dirty sugar solution, I just had to pour it through. As it passed over the
Bro, what the
resin,
fuck?
it
Reg,
pulled out
what?
anything that was charged,
He's pissing
and this
himself.
included things like acid
Nah.
and
I'm
salts.
gonna do my own
The
thing.
sugar itself, though, was a neutral molecule, and it shouldn't have been affected by it. It even got rid of some
Why
of
is
the
it yellow
color,
now?
and after
Why is
just
it
one
pissed?
run, it was looking a lot lighter. I then swapped out the beaker for another container, and
Whoa.
I passed it all through again. I was doing this just to really make sure that I pulled out as much junk as possible.
It just looks like beer.
Actually, yeah. Now
When
with
it was
like the
done,
bubbles.
I washed the resin with some extra water, and at this point,
Nah.
it should have been
this?
relatively pure. Besides the obvious orange color, there should have been practically no salts or acid. However, the main
Practically,
issue
definitely.
now was that there was still way too
Hmm.
much water, and I had to get rid of most of it.
This is all
So,
come from
after
fucking
pouring it
cotton,
all
man.
into this large dish, I threw it into a food dehydrator.
How does he do this?
This is
No
normally meant for
idea.
things like peppers or fruit, and it's basically just a warm box with a fan.
Oh,
I then
sick.
ran it until I
So
felt
an
that it was
oven.
low enough, which ended up taking about 35 hours.
Oh,
After that, I took
it
it
looks
out,
like an oven, to be
and
fair.
I poured it all into a beaker.
I would drink that.
It was just slightly over 400
It looks
mils,
like piss.
and now that it was more concentrated,
Making it better
it
for me
was
to
a bit
drink.
darker. It was
Oh my
also
god,
slightly
bro.
acidic,
Oh my
and it had
god.
a bit of a weird smell. This unfortunately meant that I had to go back to the ion exchange resin. This time, though, I did it in a different tube that I made from a water bottle. This one had a valve at the bottom that I could close, so everything wouldn't pass through right away. I also included a bunch of activated charcoal along with the resin, which I was hoping would
How
help
do you activate
with the smell
charcoal?
and color. After everything was
I
added,
don't
I
actually know.
stirred it
Charcoal
around,
is just
and then I let
charcoal.
it sit there.
Apparently
Yeah,
it's good
like
I
for your
wasn't
skin,
sure how
to be
long I
fair.
had to leave it, and based on almost
is
nothing,
it?
I decided
Yeah.
that 5 hours was probably good. Over that time,
I thought it was
I
a shit
just
you put in a
randomly
fucking
stirred
furnace.
it every so often,
Minecraft
and it
moment.
did get noticeably lighter.
Oh yeah, there's
When it
like
hit the 5
shampoos
hour
and
mark, I opened the
conditioners which
valve,
use activated
and I
charcoal.
drained everything out.
Ah.
Piss.
I washed everything with a bit of extra water, and it was now
So
hopefully
he needs to
cleaner.
get rid of the
The only
water,
thing that I didn't
so he's
like
adding more
was
water.
that it looked
Yeah,
a
makes
bit
sense.
cloudy. To fix this, I tried pouring it through some cotton and sea light,
Oh,
but
more
I
cotton.
don't think that did much of anything.
Ah.
In any case, what I had now was still way better, and it no longer had a weird smell. It
No longer
basically
smells
just
like
smelled
piss.
like
Nice.
water, and it also wasn't acidic. The only issue was that there was still way too much water, so I put it back into the dehydrator.
No!
Back in the oven it goes.
This is
Until it
Michael
looked
after.
like it was almost all gone. When I felt that it was done, I pulled it out, and I put it in an
Michael!
even smaller container.
Michael!
This one was
Guys.
made of silicone, and if I had made any sugar,
He putting
I
it
was
into fucking
hoping that
ice
it
tray.
wouldn't stick to it.
Yeah.
After that, I
Nope,
put
it's
it
going
back
back.
in, and I ran
Oh,
it
back in the oven it
until
goes.
it looked like the volume stayed constant. When it eventually looked like it was done,
Looks like a
I
pancake.
took it out. I was really
It looks
hoping
like
to see some
it looks
nice
like
and
Jello.
crunchy sugar, but that of course
no,
wasn't the case.
looks like glass.
Only
Oh,
this part in
oh
the
wait, no,
corner
that's just like
kind of
someone's
looked like
cracked
it was
iPhone
solid.
16.
I thought that maybe it was just having a hard time crystallizing, so I covered it and I put it in the
He put it
freezer
like a
for a couple
Tupperware box.
days.
Yeah, he's going in the fridge.
When I
freezer.
took it out, I thought that it was looking really
It's
promising.
back.
That is literally just like someone's cracked phone
However,
screen.
it wasn't.
Oh, 100%.
It was all goopy and honestly a bit disappointing, but I was still kind of happy.
That looks
Even
delicious.
though it wasn't nice and crunchy, the
That
texture more or
that
less
looks like
confirmed that it was sugar.
off gone like Starburst.
Yeah, but nah, like
There
it's
weren't
just
very many
burnt
other
stuff.
things
It's
that I
slapping
could have
it
made
off
here
white.
that would be sticky and gooey like this. I wasn't exactly sure why it wasn't completely solid, but I figured it was probably because I just didn't dry it enough. There
Yeah,
was still some water in there, making it
Yeah,
all sticky,
it's
and
still
need a bit more
unfortunately,
dry time.
I had to get it out.
Should have put it back in
If
the
I
oven
tried
more.
putting this into a cotton candy machine, it would be an absolute mess.
Oh wait, yeah, we're making cotton
To
candy
dry
with
it,
this.
I put together this little setup,
No
which
shit,
is
that's the
just an
whole
upside-down
point.
I thought we were
tray
just
on a
making
hot
sugar. My
plate
bad. I already
with
forgot.
a baking sheet on top. I then scraped off all the sugar, which totally stuck to the silicone, and I transferred it all here.
Looks like honey.
I slowly turned up the heating,
No.
and I brought it up to just above 100 C to boil off the water.
What the fuck?
Why
I
is
let
it
it bubble
collapsing
like this
in
for
on
a
itself?
while, and after several minutes,
Yeah,
it was probably
It looks
pretty
like a
dry.
face, like two
I
eyes
still
and a
wasn't
mouth.
done though, because
it's like
even
help
with it
me.
dry, I knew that it still wouldn't work to make cotton candy. This was because
Why?
I had already done a few basic tests
Oh, thank you.
using pure glucose, and it had completely failed. I had no idea why, but it only seemed to work when the glucose was partially caramelized. So, I slowly raised the temperature of the hot plate, and I brought it up to 185°C. Under this high heat,
Okay.
the sugar was hopefully caramelizing, which
Mhm.
actually meant that it was repolymerizing.
What the fuck
This
does
was
that mean?
basically the exact opposite of what I did to make the sugar, and I was rebuilding them back into slightly longer chains. It
No.
would still be edible, though, and it would never go back to being like cotton. My only issue here was that I had
That'd
no
be crazy
idea
with
how
this
long I
bag.
had to heat it for,
He's
and I was
just like
also really afraid of
undone his
burning
whole
it.
progress.
I ended up letting it go
the
until I
fuck?
felt that it looked good, which took
That
about
don't
an
look
hour.
good.
No,
I
that
then
does
took
not
it off the
look good.
hot plate,
That looks like a
and I
shit egg.
waited for it to cool down to room temperature.
Oh my.
After half an hour, it looked exactly the same, and for a second, I thought that it was still all goopy. When I poked at it, though,
Yo,
Huh?
it's that shit from Squid Games.
it was completely solid, and it also looked and felt like candy. I was pretty
What?
happy with how it had turned out,
Candy.
and it was a lot more sugar than I needed. It was also a lot more than I ever expected to get, especially after my failures with the enzyme. However, the yield was technically kind of
Now he's
crappy,
cracked it.
and I only got about 20 grams.
No.
In theory,
That's 20
I probably
grams.
should have gotten at least 50. This meant that I had lost a lot along the way, and I honestly have no idea where it went. I'm thinking that a
Like my
lot of
dad.
it might have gotten trapped in the exchange resin or in all the calcium sulfate. Or maybe, in general, the process just wasn't super efficient.
Nah.
Either way, I never expected this process to be amazing, and 20 grams was more than enough. I was also honestly still kind of amazed that I had even managed to get
It looks
any
like
sugar at
wafer.
all. Even though I
It
had done
actually
this all
does.
myself, I still thought that it was hard to believe that this used to be a bag of cotton balls.
No, nor can I.
One thing, though, was that I
Yeah.
still wasn't 100% sure that this was sugar. I mean, I had tested it with a glucose strip, but I felt that there was only one way
Some of it
to
looks like
fully
digestive
confirm it.
biscuits, though.
Up until now, I had
Or
completely resisted
it looks
tasting
like
it, and I was
Mini
really
and
fudge.
anxious to
shortbread.
try it. If there was
It looks like
anything
a,
else in there,
it
it would probably
it
taste
looks like
really
some
bad or
really weird
sour,
fudge.
and I was honestly
Yeah, I wouldn't
kind of
eat it,
expecting
yeah.
that to happen.
Yeah.
Warning, inject. Okay, wait, let me read.
Okay, so
No.
I guess I'll just have
No,
that.
go back. A general
This is a
advisor didn't
good
say anything.
idea.
I came to the lab. I'm confident now. I mean, it's safe, but I'm still taking risks. So therefore, like
Don't do this
endpoint,
at home.
don't. Yeah, literally, don't try this, and if you do, you will die.
Yeah, let him cook.
Yeah, he's a
Okay,
professional.
so I
He
guess
went
I'll
to
just
university.
taste one of the little
Yes.
pieces. It tastes pretty good.
Nah.
Nah.
Caramelized sugar. Yeah, that's it.
What?
That's my whole review. Done.
We've gone from cotton balls to
Okay,
fucking
so it was
caramel
actually a
sugar.
lot better than I expected, and it didn't even
Where's the
have a
fucking
hint
cotton
of a weird
candy?
flavor. But anyway, I guess it was now time
This.
to try and turn it into
Wow.
cotton candy. To do this, I figured that all I needed was a cotton candy machine, and I bought one from Amazon. Now, in
That's
theory,
not a good
based on the
idea.
instructions,
Yeah,
all I had to do was
it's
wait
not
for
gonna
it to
break or
heat
anything.
up
I had the exact
and
same one.
drop in my sugar. So I waited for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I nervously took out my precious little pieces.
Doesn't have
I
to be
then dropped some
pulverized
in,
because it's not gonna.
and I turned on the spinner. I was really hoping to see some nice puffs of cotton candy, but that didn't happen. All it
No.
did was shoot out a sad brown liquid. When I saw this, I was honestly pretty disappointed. Yeah. And I wasn't sure why it failed. It just shot it all out. It just shot it out as liquid sugar. Based on my small tests, I was really expecting it to just work. But then again, I'm not some sort of cotton candy master. Cut. It didn't work. See, that's what I feared. I ended up trying it a few more times, and it just never seemed to work.
Okay.
At first, I had no idea why it was failing like this, but I started thinking that the melting point of my candy was just too low. If that were the case, it might just be having a hard time freezing as it flew through the air. This machine was designed for table sugar, or sucrose, which melts at 186 C, but glucose melts around 146
Oh,
C,
okay.
and my sugar was
Ah.
probably even lower. I was hoping that this would have been fixed by caramelizing it, but I guess I didn't
No.
caramelize it enough.
Nah.
I think it just has to be more
Put it back in the
caramelized.
oven.
So, I scraped off
Back in
all
the
the
oven,
sugar from my
bitch.
sad and failed attempts, and I put it back onto the silicone baking
That looks
sheet.
like
I then
a
heated it up
really bad
again
like
to
quaver.
about 200 C. I had no
Looks
idea
like
how
a
long I
the
had
inside
to
of a
cook it
Rolo.
for, and again, I was a bit afraid of burning it. Over 20 minutes, it darkened a bit more, and when I eventually felt that it was good, I took it off the heat. I then let it cool down like before, and I broke it into a bunch of smaller pieces.
Okay.
Okay, so I was now ready to try again, and I was kind of expecting the same results. In theory, the caramelization should have fixed things, but I was a bit scared because if it didn't, I was kind of out of ideas. There was only one way to find out, though, and I dropped some pieces into the machine.
I mean, you did get it off Amazon, so.
Yeah. So the machine could be broken.
Yeah. Handled with care.
I then
more
turned
like
it on,
handled
and now I
cares.
just had to wait. In the meantime, I got ready by climbing up on my little ladder. It was a little awkward, but I found that reaching over the camera was the only decent way to film this. I was half expecting it to almost immediately just shoot out as goo again,
It's not.
but that didn't seem to be happening.
Oh
In fact, it
What's
didn't
going
seem
on?
to be doing much of anything.
Okay.
no.
It's having taking a lot longer. I kept waiting, and I was a bit worried that it would just burn or something, but then there was suddenly a bunch of nice fluff. I then quickly
What
used the
the?
stick, and I tried collecting it, and it was actually working. The
That
first
is
thing that I
What
noticed,
the?
though, was that it looked a lot thicker than regular cotton candy.
Yeah,
I
that is
mean,
true.
it was all yellow, and the machine
Yeah.
sounded like it was dying, but it was still pretty exciting. When it eventually looked like it wasn't making anymore, I turned off the machine.
Oh, looks like a dildo. I know.
Oh my god.
It looks like a very tiny mop.
Okay, so
Looks like a
apparently it
peep.
had worked, and even though it was probably the saddest and most pathetic cotton candy I'd ever seen, I was still really happy with it.
Eat it.
I also really wanted to know how it tasted. I mean, it tastes like regular cotton candy, just a lot more burnt. It's not bad, but it's also not good.
Well, I
The
mean,
only major
it's not
issue with
farts.
it, besides looking
Yeah.
and tasting
You're
like
not dead.
industrial grade cotton
Yeah, that is
candy,
true.
was that it didn't last very long. Even though it was able to solidify, it seemed like it wanted to melt. In just a few minutes, it had shrank quite a bit, and it had gotten a lot harder. All the work, all of my work to get this.
I mean, it's still pretty good.
Before it completely died, though, I
Yeah.
broke off a piece of it, and I compared it to a cotton ball.
That,
In my opinion, they
fuck?
were shockingly similar,
What the?
and the cotton candy kind of just looked like a really used and dirty one.
yeah,
But anyway,
Yeah.
in the end,
It just looks
I
like a
guess I
cut
was
cotton ball.
successful at turning
ate it.
cotton balls
yeah, combo.
into cotton candy. I mean, it wasn't the most efficient transformation, and the quality wasn't exactly the best, but it was still a lot better than I expected, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. For now, though,
So am I.
think I'm done messing around with sugar, and I'm gonna focus on some other projects, like turning plastic gloves into hot sauce.
And we'll be watching that sometime in the future. So,
Yeah, probably in like 6 weeks.
yeah.
Is that?
Okay, wait. Shut up.